Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. A really common question I frequently get asked is what software and apps are needed to manage construction projects. So in this episode, I'm just going to unpack that a little bit more and explain my thoughts on it. I'll share some of the software and apps that I'm using. But ultimately, if you are thinking that you can't get started managing your projects because you don't have the right software and apps, I'm here to say, don't worry about software and apps. When I go through what I'm using, you'll find that you don't need anything super special, particularly if you are just getting started. And on the basis that I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are dipping their toe in the water, they're doing their early projects, their first few projects. Most of those are relatively straightforward projects. You might feel that they're complex for you, but in the grand scheme of managing projects, they're probably fairly small and fairly straightforward. And as I say, there's some great software available, and I'll give you some examples. But in reality, everything you've got or everything you need to manage your first projects, you probably already got. And if you haven't got it, you can almost certainly get something suitable for free. So don't feel that you need to be rushing out and buying anything smart or clever for where you are with your refurbishment. Now, over the years, if I go back to when I first started working in construction, there was, of course, no computers back in those days. And as computers came in, we obviously all started using the Microsoft products. And then later on, bespoke things started to get written. But most of those bespoke products are actually not really suitable for smaller projects. They're almost overcomplicated, and certainly price-wise, it's not a price that you really you need to be paying or want to be paying at the early stages. So things that I think you'll definitely need to allow you to get started. I don't think I could operate without some kind of task management software. Now, there's lots of different software out there. Some of them will work on the phone. Some will work on desktop, laptop. Some of them are Apple. Some of them are Microsoft, Windows. So, there's a lot of different things out there. A lot of them obviously are multi-platform, which is probably where you want to be looking for. But I think if you can at least put together some kind of to-do list as an absolute bare minimum, then that's definitely going to help you get started. If you've got a little team around you, if you've got some people, perhaps you've got a VA, a PA that do some of the admin for you, then there's certainly no harm in coming away from just a basic list that you can only have on your own phone and getting some proprietary software. But you shouldn't need to pay for that. Most task management softwares I've seen that allow you to have 8-10 members of your group are free. I use Asana. I've actually only used Asana for the last 12 months. Prior to that, I was using some software called Insightly, but it didn't really quite do what I wanted it to do. And to some extent, I've merged two requirements together to use Asana, and I'll come to the other thing shortly. So I think a task management software is brilliant. It's not essential, by the way. And as I've just said, I didn't really I haven't used Asana for much more than a year, and Prior to that, I did have a task management software, but I didn't use it for day-to-day management of my construction projects. What I used for day-to-day management of my construction projects was nothing more than Google Sheets, and prior to that, Excel. Reason I went to Google Sheets is because I could share things with more people, and multiple members of my team could work on the same documents at the same time and see them updated live. Where I have been for years and years, and this kind of goes back to the early days of Excel, where when I first started using computers, was I realized that I could put together a schedule in Excel where effectively, in very simple terms, I could have a date in the first column when I put a new task into it. The next description, next column could be a description of what I needed to do relating to that project. I'd sometimes have another column where I would categorize that. Is it to do with the account? Is it to do with managing the builder? Is it to do with managing the design? So I'd sometimes have some tags in there, effectively, is what we'd call them nowadays. I'd quite often have a bit of a target date in there, so I knew where I was aiming for. And then I'd either yeah, have a tick box or a completion date in the last column. Often I would just hide well, in the early days, probably delete in the rows. Later on, I'd hide them, and obviously later on, as filters came about, we could use those and show things even better. I was running a sizable project back in 2020, 2021 or so. In fact, yeah, it was then because it was partially through lockdown. And we had a reasonable sized team. There was me and two others on my side helping me deliver this project. Plus, my client had a team. I think there were three of them as well. So there were six of us that were looking at this schedule. And one of the things I was encouraging everyone to do was that we all populated this schedule as things came to mind, particularly as my clients were really concerned about a number of things they would pop into their mind. And I was just encouraging them every time something pops in your mind, just put it on this schedule. And then we've got this master schedule and we can review this. Every time we met, we could review it between us, particularly me, review it on a frequent basis to make sure that we weren't missing anything. And that schedule became enormous, but of course we were hiding the rows as we got things closed off, and we were categorizing them, and it was quite a complex schedule in the end, but it worked for all of us. And part of the reason that it worked for all of us was because it was using basic software. And certainly my client side of the team, they were not super experienced in construction. They knew nothing about construction. In fact, this was all relating to a church refurbishment. So it was members of the church community. They were doing it in their spare time as a service to their church. Effectively, they were managing this project. And so, as a result of not overcomplicating it, these members of the community actually used the schedule. It was in a format they recognised. Some of them possibly hadn't used Sheets before, but it was very easy for them to learn that and migrate from Excel, which most people have used. So I would say, even to this day, do not overlook the power of a schedule of some type in Sheets or Excel. I do all of my schedules of works in Excel. I find it really easy to copy and paste, really easy to add columns where to encourage builders to price the various elements. So yeah, again, so there's nothing super special in there. And really, for a long, long time, um, Excel was all we ever really had, and all we ever used for most things that we were doing when we were managing projects. Some people I know would have prefer to use Word or Google Docs. Instead, these are Word type word processing documents back in their old days for doing for writing letters and things, which of course we don't do quite so much now. I would use them sometimes to do some schedules, but not very often. For me, my go-to was always Excel. But I know some people aren't super excited by Excel and Sheets. So yeah, don't overlook the fact that you can do similar things in Word or in Docs, but it's not quite as easy, not quite as versatile. But that may well work for you. As things moved on and as software got better, one of the things I saw come out quite quickly, and I use periodically, although I use it in a slightly different format, is there's now quite a lot of software available and apps available that will allow you to do checklists, multiple checklists for recurring type tasks. So I did see those start to come out when I was managing projects. The thing about a lot of those tasks from a project management perspective, a lot of what we're doing is not routine and regular inspections. The builders themselves may well be doing some regular inspections, particularly relating to, say, health and safety. On a Monday morning, they may well be walking around a project, checking the scaffold still, in good condition. It hasn't been damaged over the weekend. Checking they're secure, checking that they've got all of their sign-in details are up to date, checking that nothing on the notice board has got affected, checking basic things like the toilets are working, there's hot water, etc., etc. Everything that contractors are obliged to do. So, from a contractor's perspective, there are definitely some inspection packages that would be beneficial for them. And when I was working in as managing day-to-day projects, when I was working for building contractors, those bits of software would just come into to the fore. We weren't really using them. I wasn't working for a huge company, so we were trying to find things that worked, but a lot of the time in those days they were expensive to buy. You'd buy them and then find they didn't really work for you. So I was still doing quite a lot on paper copies. We had a lot of paper forms back in those days. And by the way, this is only 2000, well, running up to 2010, 2011, when I actually left employment within construction. So, in the grand scheme of things, not that long ago, we were still doing huge amounts on paper. I actually don't have any inspection templates for anything to do with project managing projects for me, managing projects for other clients when I was doing that. I do have some relating to managing my own properties, and to do some weekly inspections and some monthly inspections. And those are all managed. They've got phone apps. The software I use is called Safety Culture. It actually came from off the back of a company that put together health and safety checklists, but I've just put together some standard checklists well, I don't very often use them, but my team use them for those inspections. But if you're managing projects, you probably don't need to use those. You probably won't get any real benefit from them. If you need to put together a list, say you want to put together a list of, perhaps you're snagging the project towards the end. If I was doing a snagging list now, I would still go back and put it in Excel. That's still my go-to because there's nothing standard about it. I want to type some descriptions about it. I perhaps want to allocate it to some specific people, less so likely now, as a manager. But when I was working as a managing tradesman, I was putting putting tradesmen against different elements of it. Again, perhaps with some target dates, maybe with a space for some comments, who to contact and things like that. But I would, by and large, build all of that up in Excel rather than try and create a checklist for it because it's not repetitious. Yeah, checklists work for things that are repetitious. Uh, Obviously, as a manager, I'm going to appoint an architect. They're going to use their own software, CAD-based software, to do drawings for me. But there are times where I sometimes want to do my own basic drawings to get an idea of room layouts for HMOs, floor layouts for flats, work out where I'm going to put sockets and things like that, where I've built some uh, reconfigured some walls and just done some basic work and don't actually need uh, building regulation drawings, I will do drawings for myself, and like I say, occasionally to market and things like that. For there's again lots of free software available on the internet. For a long time, I've used floorplanner.com. I'm not entirely sure that's free any longer. I think you might get 4 or 5 plans for free, but I appear to have tripped into a paid subscription service now, which means as a result, I don't use Floor Planner that often, and I'm pretty certain next time I need some drawings, I'll look for something else that's free, even if that only gives me another 5 for free, or I'll perhaps log into Floor Planner on a different email address. But you didn't hear that from me, of course. Um, so, uh, but look for those things. Find the one that you like. Find the one that's easy to use. You're not going to need it to do millimeter perfect drawings, uh, that you if you've got those, you need those from your architect. You're not going to need them for building regulation drawings. You're going to need to engage an architect for that as well. But if you just want some basic floor plans, then yeah, there's certainly nothing wrong with floor planner and similar things like that. Um, Hopefully, what you can see already is that there really, yeah, we're into the nuts and bolts of things, and there really isn't a great deal, you know, of software out there. Uh, the other software I use a reasonable amount, but this again won't be of any use to any of you guys, but just to explain that it's there in case you want it or you need to know about it, is when we put together formal contracts for the builders, when I put them together between builders and employers. I use online software called JCT On Demand, which allows me to download a master contract and electronically complete that online. Now, as you're probably well aware, the JCT forms of contract need this person in the middle. So we have the 2 parties, we have the builder, we have the employer, we have this person in the middle called a contract administrator. And really, that software is for the contract administrator to use. So I think you're not going to need that because you're going to need a contract administrator, but that's something else I use. Now, that is actually all I use at the moment for managing projects. And that is more than I was using, say, 12, 15, 20 years ago. 15, 20 years ago was all just Excel. That was pretty much all we had. And I had a book of my tasks. I just write tasks on a daily basis. And then, of course, that migrated into Excel and go back further still. And of course, all we ever had were books and line paper. So, what you can see is, building was very late as an industry. Building was very late to IT and technology. That frustrated me, by the way, because I really wanted to adopt IT and technology. And for a long time, I was the go-to expert on IT and technology in the company I was working in because I just knew more than anyone else, really. But at that stage, everyone was learning. So we all got going on Excel and things just improved along that way. Now, there's other software out there that I'm aware other people use. I know there's some smart survey and scanning software on some phones where you can point the phone towards the corner of the rooms and the top corners of the ceilings, and it works out dimensions for you, and that will allow you to do drawings as well. Not something I've ever felt I needed. I've always come from the mindset that I am a manager of teams and of people, And my skill set is actually managing other people. It's not actually doing. So if I'm managing other people, what do I need to do? I need to have processes in place to make sure I don't miss anything as a manager. And of course, nowadays that's a task manager. And earlier on, as I say, it was Excel. So yeah, and I want to see reports and I want to see feedback and things like that. And that's really why, as a if you're managing, if you are managing a smallish project, um, you really don't need anything too complicated. So that's what I said at the start. Don't overthink it because I know sometimes, and we've all been there, you overthink it too much and then you don't actually get started. What I'm saying is you have got what you need to get started. And if you need something a bit more, you can get it for free when and as and if you need it. Now, if you grow your business and you get involved with larger projects, and I'm not putting any monetary value on them, but as you get into larger projects, you will find and I suppose not only just larger projects, but perhaps if you get to a point where you're running a larger business where you've got a lot more projects running at any one time, you will find that there are proprietary products out there that you may want to consider that you're going to have to pay for those software. They're going to be on subscription. I've not really got a lot of experience on using those. I've seen a few of them. I can't even remember. I can't even remember. One of them was by a company called Fonn, that I used a few years ago. But um, as I say, you're not really going to find many of them. They are primarily written either for contractors, so they're set up to help contractors manage their day-to-day operations, and effectively are just a building interface of a task manager, probably some kind of inspections and checklists and things like that. And probably got some kind of spreadsheet accounting type things in there as well. They're all going to be different, but they're going to be very much suited towards a building contractor, and them managing their business. Now, some of that software will have the opportunity to share elements of it externally. And of course, the builder could share some elements with you as their client, as their project manager, and maybe with your architect as well. And if you've got quantity surveyors and other people in the team, they will share that back the other way with you, which means you won't have to pay for it. You'll just have access to view elements of their whole management system. You won't be able to get access, well, unless they've set it up wrongly, you won't get access to the day-to-day nitty gritty. You'll only get access to the elements that may be of relevance to you. There's similar kinds of software for what we might consider as developers as well. So and really, the difference between builders and developers is builders are very much coming in, tendering a project that's pre-designed and taking that forward, whereas developers are really finding land a bit more speculatively, and gaining planning applications, planning permission for that, and putting together a scheme and then developing it out later on. So you'll find software that picks up that early stage as well, and software that picks up the whole lot. And as I say, that all allows a lot more collaboration. Unless you're going to step up to that next level and become much more of a developer, finding plenty of sites and having having multiple teams and having multiple projects on the go at any one time. That's the point you may want to look at some of this proprietary software. But in reality, you can still run all of those. And the last developer I worked with, which now was probably about 8 years ago or so, the last developer I worked with had still not got to a point, even though they had a good few £1 million worth of work going through their pipeline at any one time. In fact, probably way more than that, probably heading up towards £10 million of work going through their pipeline at any one time. they still hadn't found any software that they believed was worth spending the money to bring in, and was any better than they. I know they had some task managers going, and they did a lot in Excel and Sheets. So don't feel that even as you grow, you're going to need anything straight away. Of course, new software comes out all of the time. I'm not aware of all of the software that's out there at all. And I just keep my finger on the pulse. I talk to people, see what they're using, see what they're doing. But by and large, one thing I've found is I think there's a lot of people, and this I think could easily have been me, not so much now, but back in the day to a certain extent. I wanted to embrace software and apps back in the day, and it wasn't really available. I did my best, and obviously that's how kind of got going on all of this. I suspect there's some people that feel now they need to be using software and apps and are probably using things that aren't ideal, and aren't much better than Excel in some respects. And I keep saying Excel because I really think if you can use Excel as a project manager, you can pretty much sort out anything that you need to do. So if you need anything, if you want anything, I would say Excel or Sheets is the answer. Anything else is just a little bit of cream on the top. The key thing is don't overthink it. Don't hold back until you've got or found the right bit of software. I'd encourage you to get started. This podcast is all about giving you encouragement to get started and get going managing your projects. And again here with software and apps, don't hold back waiting for the right thing to come along. You have almost certainly got the basics of what you need on any system you've got at the moment, and use what you're used to, use what you know, and just grow into things. Ask other people what they're using, see if it works for you. If it does work for you, then by all means adopt it. If it doesn't, walk away from it. And I've walked away from so much software and so many apps in my time, which almost they market to you as though they are the solution to everything, but in my experience, they're not really any better than anything I can do in basic software that I've already got. So I really hope that just answers that question. And again, another question I get really, really frequently. If you've got any questions you'd like me to cover on these podcasts, by the way, then just drop me a message. And it'll be really good to hear from you, and I can schedule it in for you. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening to this one.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share, and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.